Hi, this will be a complete look at the finished features so far for my upcoming MIDI hardware sequencer. The box is still in the prototype stage and doesn't completely represent the final product. This is a compact MIDI step sequencer and a live recording MIDI looper. It's a compositional tool that controls synthesizers, samplers, and other MIDI gear. It allows the user to manually place and edit notes, control, and other MIDI events on a grid, similar to the MIDI piano roll features found in a DAW, and it can also record MIDI input in real time. It's capable today of running 64 monophonic MIDI tracks simultaneously, each up to 64th note resolution, including all triplet steps that are in between, making 96 steps available in each bar. In the main view, this grid of 32 buttons has horizontal rows of information. The bottom row are the track groups. There are 8 track groups, each containing up to 8 tracks for a total of 64 tracks that you can access and activate independently. The next row are bars. Each track group can have up to 8 bars. The 2 rows on top are the steps contained within the selected bar. The default zoom level is showing 16th notes, and there are 16 step buttons, but you can view more or even less steps at one time. We'll get into the zoom feature more a little later. The 8 buttons off to the side are function buttons that don't change. Here you have the commands for start and stop, tempo, zoom, delete, track group expand, and mixer view. The last 2 buttons are reserved for an upcoming purpose that I'm not ready to reveal. As you select buttons in either the main grid or the function area, the button will light up brightly, and the 3 screens at the top will show the parameters related to that button. To edit any of the parameters, just press the switch beneath the screen and use the rotary control to make your change in real time. And there's no need to press again before moving on to your next task. With some button selections, there may be more than 3 parameters available to edit, and that's indicated by these arrows. Just turn the rotary knob without having any parameters selected, and you'll scroll through all the available parameters. These switches, as well as many of the function buttons, have a behavior that allows you to hold them while you make an edit, and then you let them go. The button is unselected automatically. A good demonstration of that is the delete button. If I want to delete a track, bar, or step, I can press the delete button, and it'll turn red, indicating whatever I press next will be deleted. When I finish with my deletions, I press the delete button again. Or I could hold the delete button down, make my deletions, and then let go of delete. This helps with economy of motion in your workflow. All buttons and switches can also be pressed simultaneously, which helps speed up some processes. The grid buttons also all have a copy-paste feature when you hold them. Hold down the source track group, track, bar, or step, and simply press the empty location where you want the copies to appear. It's pretty straightforward. Select the track you are editing, select the bar you are editing, and press the step to either add or edit an existing event. In the menu, you can adjust the relevant parameters. If you're using notes, then both the note number and the pitch are displayed, along with the octave. Velocity is the typical MIDI value of 0 through 127, and length will light up steps on the grid as you edit to give a visual indication. The value in the display will also show when you've reached certain length intervals, such as 16th, 8th note, quarter note, etc. The 16 steps on the grid mapped to 16th note intervals are okay for a lot of general editing, but music rarely stays confined to just 16th notes, so you can place notes all the way up to 64th notes, including every triplet in between. To do this, activate the zoom function. You can zoom in all the way to the 64th note level, or zoom out down to the quarter note level. You can see how the active steps are either separating or collapsing to reveal and hide more information. As you zoom in, new pages will be available to navigate through the entire bar. If the sequencer is running in chase mode, like you see right now, you can freeze the UI to lock onto a certain page by simply making a page selection. At some point, a song is probably going to evolve beyond a single track. You can simply add new tracks on the bottom row. Technically, I've just added what's called a track group. A track group is really a collection of up to 8 individual tracks. I can expand the track group, and now the same bottom row has space to activate 7 more tracks. Groups can serve as a convenient way to organize related polyphonic or multi-track instruments such as drums. Let's take a look at the parameters of a single track. A track maps to one of the 16 MIDI channels. This is what determines which external gear the sequence track will control. Right now, it's possible to make a track that can send notes, control changes, or program changes. The remaining parameters change depending on the track type that you select. We'll just focus on notes for the moment. The next 3 parameters set the initial value of any note that you add. I'll demonstrate everything discussed so far by creating a multi-track drum part in the first track group. The next evolution your pattern might take is wanting more than one bar. The second row allows you to add up to 8 bars to each track group independently, meaning that track group 1 can have 2 bars and track group 2 can have 3 bars. Every track group can run its own cycle of bars. You might have noticed by now that there's a chase mode available when the sequence is playing. Chase mode is what moves the focus automatically to each new bar as the sequence is playing, allowing you to see all the notes in the track as they go by. You can freeze the focus at any time by pressing the bar or one of the steps in the bar. Chase mode can be activated by pressing any bar twice. Things can get really unusual and experimental when you shorten a bar length, which you can do in 16th note intervals. To create a bar with a 3/4 time signature, you'd set the length to 12. Bar 1 repeats here, and bar 2 repeats here. The second track group is continuing through all its bars in 4/4. This can all be used to create interesting polyrhythms or even some unusual, nearly random sounding pattern revolutions. And if you want to go for a touch of something really chaotic, you can set each track group to run through the bars in forward, reverse, or random order. You can imagine what gets created by setting an unequal number of bars between track groups, then a variety of bar lengths, and then on top of all that, set reverse or random order for how the bars will play in any given track group. So now that I've shown the basic pattern and step editing features, it's time to highlight some of the advanced ways you can make step editing even quicker and more dynamic. First, when faced with editing the same value in a lot of notes, you can leave the parameter menu selected and simply move focus from one note to the other while adjusting the value with the rotary encoder. Let's say, for instance, I have this group of hi-hat notes. They're all playing at the same velocity, which sounds unnatural. I know that I need to weaken some of the velocities and strengthen others to give it a more dynamic feel. I can select the first note, select the velocity parameter, and leave it selected as I move from note to note, adjusting the velocity at each step. Another thing you can do is lock the track menu by holding the track button down for 2 seconds. A locked menu is indicated by these white lines. This keeps the parameters of the track in view until you're done with them. Now you can adjust the default note parameters before you place any note, and the newly placed notes will take those values. So just like in the example before, I'll make a dynamic sounding hi-hat pattern, but this time I'll be adjusting the velocities as I add the notes. Then just unlock the track menu by pressing any of the track buttons. In addition to the method I just showed you, if you have a keyboard hooked up, either via the MIDI DIN or the provided USB host connection, you can control the track's default values in real time. As long as the track channel matches the keyboard channel, you'll see the default parameters for note and velocity changing with each keyboard press. If you want to lay down uniform notes, you can do that quickly as well. Those features are found in the bar parameters. Autofill will seed the bar with uniformly spaced notes at most rhythmic intervals. Shift will move every note over one step at a time. And note length can be used to set every note's length. The last thing to highlight in note editing is tied notes. A tied note in music is when two notes that are of the same pitch are connected so that the second note just continues on from the first, as if it's one longer note. You can enable that feature in the track menu. With two notes on the grid, when the length of the first note touches the starting point of the second note, the display will indicate that the notes are tied. As you can hear, the first note and the second note now sound like one played note. You're probably asking, why not just make the first note longer and not have the second note at all? It's because tied notes can work across bars, and that makes it easier to visualize one longer note that runs the length of several bars. The last note of the first bar is now tied to the first note of the second bar. What's more is tied notes can connect from the end of the last bar back to the very beginning. Now I have one sustained unbroken note that'll continue on until I stop the sequencer. The last thing about enabling tied notes is that it also enables legato playing. Not to be confused with the legato feature that can be found in some synthesizers, this legato is about the performance that the musician puts into their playing on the keyboard. When a musician plays legato, the first note at one pitch is blended into the second note at another pitch. The difference sounds like this without legato, and a sound like this with legato. The legato feature works much like tied notes. When the length of the first note touches the starting point of the second note and the second note's at a different pitch, legato is indicated in the display. The amount of legato is controllable by continuing to adjust the length of the first note. Well, that covers the main grid. Now I'm going to turn attention to the mix grid. On the mix grid, information is arranged vertically like a mixing console. The bottom row still has track groups and tracks, but now the buttons above each of those control some feature on that track. In this view, when a pattern is playing, the lights of the tracks now blink along with the notes, which can give a good visual indication of which track is playing what. The first button up is track mute, and the second button up is track solo. If you use these on a track group, they'll apply to all tracks within that group, but you can also expand the track group and apply them to individual tracks. Pressing the third button shows other parameters. Right now, track velocity and transpose are there. Velocity will reduce or increase the velocity of just that track by a relative amount. Like mute and solo, this can be applied to the track group or an individual track. Just like velocity, transpose will adjust the pitches by a relative amount on either the track group or an individual track. The transpose feature can be disabled for any track. Disabling it is especially needed for tracks that contain drums, where transposing would compromise the drum sounds. This is a good time to point out that when there are no options selected, you'll see a global menu that contains a transpose option as well. The various transpose levels between global, track group, and track stack up. So if a track transposes down 2 steps, and its track group transposes down 2 steps, and then the global transpose is also down 2 steps, then the track at the very bottom of that hierarchy will be down 6 steps. If you hold down the third button for 2 seconds, it'll arm the track group or the track for live recording. Any MIDI controller that's sending data to the sequencer via MIDI DIN, USB host, or USB client will get recorded if the MIDI channel being received matches the ARM tracks channel. If you arm only one track, you'll be recording monophonically. When you arm a track group, you'll be arming all 8 tracks within that group, and recordings will become polyphonic. There's an algorithm that distributes incoming notes among the ARM tracks. Anytime you arm a track, you can also enable quantize. By default, quantize is off, meaning that notes will be recorded at the sequencer's highest possible resolution. If you turn quantize on and set it to an interval, then incoming notes will be aligned to those steps only. Thank you for following my journey so far in the development of this sequencer. Though this represents the majority of what I wanted the sequencer to be able to do, the next phase of development is going to have some significant features that I'm being a bit more tight-lipped about for now, so stay tuned.